Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Wolfpacker Show. It's been a while. We've been busy during the month of June. Admittedly, we have this thing called Football Preview Magazine we have to do, and we also have a lot of football recruiting to cover on the website, and it's just all time consuming. But it's nice to now, we get towards the end of the month, the magazine's been put to bed. So you should be, if you're a member of the Wolfpack Club, you should be getting that magazine pretty shortly. If you just want to buy it, call the office, 919-688-0218, and order a magazine. It's well worth the price on the cover. But we got some time to breathe a little bit here, and all the camps and official visits have been concluded in football recruiting. So Ethan McDowell will be joining me. I guess I should have said my name earlier, Matt Carter. And we're going to be talking a lot of football recruiting here in a second. Let me just zip through everything we have to get through before we start. First of all, please rate and review this podcast wherever you may listen to it. Spotify, Google, wherever you get your download your podcast. Give it a listen, and please give it a rating. Please, a nice rating if you don't mind. Also, if you're watching on YouTube and you're not already following us, please be sure to follow us. We're getting close to 2,000. I think we might be right at 2,000. Football season will be probably about a month from now. We will be doing a lot of stuff, football coverage. We'll be down in Charlotte for ACC kickoff. We'll be covering first practice. And then before you know it, we'll be having videos of Dave Dorn happy or not so happy with the practice that day, and maybe Robert and I being philosophical about where the offense may be. So all of that to look forward to, and you can get it on our YouTube channel here as it gets ready to get ramped back up here. And last but not least, please check out our sponsor, rogueshop.com. I know they have a special going on right now that you should want to check out. What they do is they have all your natural cannabis needs, whether it's you suffer from sleep deprivation, or you have anxiety, or you're dealing with some kind of chronic pain issue, and what you have tried hasn't worked in the past, why not give this a try? They're safe, they're legal, and best of all, this is a small outfit, husband and wife outfit. Now, the husband had dealt with some of his own issues from being a disabled veteran, and these products worked for him. And so you have someone who knows these products works and they can help you out. They have real life human beings. They're ready to answer your questions, whether it's on our message board or whether it's on the chat feature of their website. So give them a check out, rogueshop.com. That's ROG as in girl, UES as in ship, HOP.com. So, all right, hopefully I didn't mess that up too much. We're ready to get started. Ethan, let's talk big picture here, football recruiting, before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of things. Compared to where we started the month of June to where we ended the month of June, it never goes as planned. It never goes as expected, right? But what have you noticed about the class and the recruiting and how it has evolved, and anything surprises you, good or bad, or just your thoughts of just how the month evolved for NC State?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it started, I think, a little slower than people would have liked. The first weekend didn't go as planned, with a few top targets ending up committing elsewhere. But then the ball started to get rolling. We started to pick up some commitments. A couple camp offers led to quick commitments, and Chase Bond obviously joined the class. And those three additions, while they might not be the highest ranked guys, they are guys that the staff loves and the staff is excited about. So, they got a few local kids on board, and I'd say the biggest surprise and probably the biggest letdown for most Wolfpack fans is going into July, NC State does not have a wide receiver commit. This is the best in-state wide receiver class in years. You can go back and look. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better one anytime recently. And while NC State is not out of the running for most of the top guys on their board, none of them are in the class, especially after that huge June 16th, 18th official visit weekend where you had guys like Jonathan Paylor, Alex Taylor, and Terrell Anderson all on campus. I put in a prediction for one of them to the Wolfpack yesterday. I put in a prediction for one of them elsewhere yesterday. So you can go check that out on the wolfpacker.com. But overall, I like some of the guys they picked up. A guy like Javon Bailey, he's a really, really good corner, someone who just shows up on game days and makes big plays. He's not going to wow you with his measurables, but he's a good player and someone that NC State really, really wanted for a long time. And we'll go deeper into the rest of the commits, I'm sure. But yeah, overall, got a nice surprise with the 2025 class getting kicked off. That's a really positive step in the right direction. And July's going to be a big month. You said you take our foots off the gas a little bit. No, I think we're going to stay on it because it's going to be a busy few months, a few weeks of announcements coming up.
I was surprised with how many offers went out at camp, to be honest with you. That has not been MO the last 5 years or so. You may get one or so. And last year they did give out a couple offers, so maybe I should not have been surprised, but they did land Zane Williams and Isaiah Jones, a couple of local products. Williams, a linebacker at Wake Forest High School. Jones, a running back at Roseville High School. Those old enough to remember that used to be one high school, Wake Forest Roseville. Now they're two separate high schools. They also offered a couple other players. I know one, Sensabaugh, off the top of my head, but he got offered by Vanderbilt. He's a Nashville native whose father played football at UNC. So as soon as he got a hometown option that was not NC State, you had to assume that Sensabaugh was probably going to jump on that. But those are the three I remember off of the class of 2024 off the top of my head. But you saw Williams, you saw Jones work out. I'd say that Jones looks like a running back. I mean, I saw him run the 40-yard dash. I had just literally walked in when he was getting ready to run, and I was, ooh, that kid looks like somebody to watch. He looks like a running back. He really only had one productive year at Roseville, which was this past year. So it may be a case of somebody's about to explode. That happened last year with Kyron Jones, by the way. Now, I'm not sure he's as athletically gifted as Kyron Jones was. But Kyron Jones was not really on the radars before NC State camp. And unfortunately for NC State, he ends up at Georgia. So that just shows you how much he blew up his senior year. And Williams is just a guy who, Ethan, we both talked to the same source who said, every time he was at camp, he was the best linebacker that day. And that's three different years. I think that just became too much to ignore over time. What are your take on those two guys?
I mean, the day that Zane was at camp, it was just his name was in the air. The camp was buzzing. It was like, hey, have you seen the kid from Roseville over in the linebacker group? He had an awesome camp, and there were multiple linebackers there that the staff brought in to evaluate who had Power 5 offers, and Zane was the one out of that group to receive the scholarship, and of course, he ended up committing. He's got the family connection, local high school kid, and he loves NC State. He is passionate about the Wolfpack, and it's really exciting to see him, consistently show up and earn an offer like that. That's one of those like feel good stories when it comes to college football recruiting that it's always good to see. And I'm really excited to have him in the class. I think he's a little undersized, but I think if Tony Gibson has proven anything, that doesn't matter in his linebacker room. If you're a player, you're a player, and he'll develop you to get there. And if he trusts his evaluation in you, then then Wolfpack, that's a linebacker Wolfpack fans should be excited about.
What about Isaiah Jones?
Yeah, so I saw him last year for a scrimmage. I forget who they scrimmaged, but I saw Roseville. I was there to see Tamarcus Cooley and Noah Rogers originally, but I was really impressed by their running back room. They Isaiah had, I believe, a couple nice runs in that game. They have two running backs there. They have a 25 kid who's pretty good too, so it might have been him. But Isaiah impressed me that night, and He put up good numbers, and the biggest part is, and this is what he told me, was from the end of his junior season, he put on a lot of weight, and that was a big deal. That was something the staff was looking for, and that's why he part of the reason why he earned that offer. While because he showed that he could put on that weight and still maintain solid speed with, I believe he ran like a 4.6,
Yeah.
like I think on the dot.
Yeah. I think people would say, oh, 40. But that's actually a pretty good 40 time. If you watch
Yeah,
these players run real 40-yard dashes and you see them getting time, the NFL combine, I think maybe skews people's perception of what to expect on a 40-yard dash time. But coming out of high school where they're not getting professional training every single day leading up to one run in 3 months, 4.6 is fine. That's plenty fine for a running back to be successful. I was out at camp when Will Wilson showed up. He also, if I'm right, Ethan can correct me if I'm wrong. He was at Alpha Wolf
he was
last year, so we've seen him a couple times now. Have a chance to throw. You saw him, I believe, at another event as well.
Under Armour in South Carolina.
Yeah, live arm, and I think the bottom line is you're talking about a young man who he's a coach's son, a longtime coach in the state of South Carolina. He's a coach's son with a huge arm, very live arm. He's not the tallest quarterback, but he's not small. He's 6'1". He's a very well put together 205, 210 pounder with athleticism. You can tell he can move, very fluid. And he had a lot of Power 5 options already, including hometown South Carolina, which is one you really want to see if you're going to recruit a quarterback from Columbia, South Carolina. I think it's one of those situations where if Will Wilson calls up NC State and says, I want to commit, NC State, they not only have to take it, they more than willingly is ready to take this. And it jumps, like you said, jump starts to 25 class. I hadn't had a whole lot of classes where the quarterback was the first commit in the class. So and it takes a lot of stress off, I feel like, because there's a lot of pressure to get that quarterback. And it consumes a lot of recruiting energy to get that quarterback. And so once you sort of have that squared away, it does take off a lot of pressure. And now you can kind of focus on the rest of the class. So there's a big benefit for having a guy like Will Wilson could start. I know you wrote a column about it that everybody should read, but what's your take on Will Wilson and having that be the sort of the central figure already in the 25 class?
Yeah, so first, it's just always good to see, regardless of rankings, especially this far out from signing day. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. He has 2 more seasons of high school football. Don't get too hung up on rankings right now. But he, that aside, when you look at, he was the first quarterback in the class to get an offer. That's huge. He's top priority guy. I'm not sure there was anyone on the board higher than him. And Coach Roper did a great job recruiting him, and they got their guy, and that's always huge. And they got him early, and in a way that is consistent with NC State's recruiting mantra. They did it by building trust and by building strong relationships with him and his family, and creating a welcoming environment on campus. When I saw him live, I don't remember much from seeing him at Alpha Wolf, but I do remember in South Carolina when I saw him at the Under Armour camp, there were a lot of good quarterbacks there. But man, his arm, it pops. The ball flies out of his hand. He looks like he can make any throw out there. And he measured in at 6'1" at the camp. It's an impressive 6'1", and he measured in at camp at 215 pounds as well. And he looks it. He's a big dude, and someone who, he's his father, who's also his coach, described as he's a passer who a very talented passer who can also, when the play breaks down, he has the running ability to go move the chains. He's just a versatile quarterback. He can do it all. And you look at those offers: South Carolina, Arkansas, TCU, Penn State. It's a really good offer list.
Yeah.
And if all of those schools are interested, then Wolfpack fans should be pretty excited.
Yeah, I'll add too, hopefully his high school team will improve. It's a rebuilding. I know when his father took over Richland Northeast, there used to be a program that had you would expect to have a player or two every year. They've won a couple of state titles in the program history. They've fallen on some hard times, and I was reading a story how they hired him to specifically try to turn that program around, and it's a process. But my long-winded way of saying too, Will Wilson may benefit from having to be a quarterback under duress, so to speak, because he's, you know, quite frankly, if his father wasn't the head coach, he's probably not at Richland Northeast. He's probably at some high school where he's, you know, like the current quarterback commits, Cedric Bailey. Good quarterbacks tend to go to good high schools that are the best situations. So he's a young man who knows what it is to quarterback under duress. He's doing it in high school right now, and as you mentioned, being able to turn a broken play into a positive play. I think he ran for 700 yards and 14 touchdowns last year, so he's a true dual threat. And you and I both talked about this. Robert and I want mobile quarterbacks. That's our understanding. We have that from very high level sources. That was kind of his mantra. He wants a quarterback that can run. Brennan Armstrong certainly can run. And Ethan, you would know, what was the quarterback before Brennan Armstrong? Bryce? Was it Bryce Young? What? No, that's the Alabama quarterback. That's what the
Bryce Perkins.
Bryce Perkins. I knew it was Bryce. Absolutely, with an athletic quarterback, and so I think they're looking for somebody that fits that mold, and for them, Will Wilson perfect. And you're right. The only other quarterback I think NC State was like, they had a couple of other offers, but at this stage, it was basically a 2-target board between him and Bryce Baker in the Winston-Salem area. And, both of them were on the board when Will Wilson picked NC State. So, in essence, they got who they wanted out of this situation. So, that's a big kudos to NC State. But I know a lot of people want to know, looking forward. It is going to be a busy couple of weeks here, we think. Today is June 28th. Next Tuesday, July 4th. I think between now, what would you say, Ethan? July 15th? It might be somewhere between 7 to 10 guys that can make decisions.
Yep.
On the board. And really, I'm thinking about 2 position groups, offensive line and wide receiver. Because I think that's right now where the huge percentage, and a little bit of linebacker, but the overwhelming percentage of what remains on the board right now, offensive line and wide receiver. And Ethan has put a ton of information out on the board, so I'm not going to give away too much. If you want to, go sign up for our site on on3s.com. It's the fastest growing network out there. It's soon to be the kingmaker of the networks out there. One of the benefits of On3 is you can look at other websites on the message board. We have the biggest Miami site out there. We got the biggest Florida State site out there. We got the biggest South Carolina site out there. We got the biggest Tennessee site out there. So we got a lot, Ole Miss. We got a lot of sites you can go see to get information from just besides us. I'm going to give my perspective. Ethan, you tell me right or wrong. Reason to be pretty optimistic about where that offensive line board will be in 2 weeks. Reason to be nervous about where the wide receiver board may be in 2 weeks. Right or wrong?
I think that's absolutely right. I have a story coming out later today that really is going to detail what can go right and what I think will go right along the offensive line board. They plan on taking 4 offensive linemen this year. By the end of the month, they could have 3 commits, in my opinion. And they're in a really good spot with Derek Plaz, who's the 4th lineman on their board right now, who is set to decide in late September, but he just visited NC State. He's trending in the right direction there. Named him their leader publicly. Everything I've heard behind the scenes there lines up with that. With the rest of the board,
I was going to say, for some perspective, Plaz is committed to Penn State at the beginning of the month, which was a decision that surprised a lot of people. This is not this is a big-time desired prospect. The other school in the mix is a big-time brand name as well. So he's a major deal. I don't know where he is rankings wise, but Plies is a big deal.
He's probably, I'd say, one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the country, just compared to, I'd say, Power Five interest versus current ranking.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think he'll end up being a high 3-star, 4-star guy by the end of it on signing day. And shoot, right now it's really Miami or NC State for him. There's potential for other schools to get involved. He's mentioned a couple other Power Five programs to me. And they're big names and they could make the recruitment interesting. But if you go down his off list, there's also like Penn State, obviously, and Florida State's a team that really wants him. And but right now, those two teams at the top are kind of holding the Seminoles at bay in his recruitment. So we'll see. But other than that, like the offensive line board is in a really good spot. Robbie Martin, he originally had a trip scheduled to Penn State. That didn't happen. It was going to be Pittsburgh for that last weekend in June. That didn't happen either. He did not take a visit, to my knowledge, that last weekend of June. So his final official visit was to NC State. That's a good sign. I've posted plenty about it on the wolfpacker.com. Go check it out. But I feel good about his recruitment going into July. Trent Mitchell's another guy. He visited in the summer, and a really high potential lineman, just great frame, great kid, who also went and visited Maryland the last weekend. But I think he left that visit uncommitted, and NC State has a good shot there going into a summer decision. And then you have Tyler West as well, who he's a quiet kid, isn't really sharing that much about his recruitment right now based on the conversations I've had, but there's still some confidence around his recruitment, and NC State has as good of a shot as anybody.
Yep. I think with you mentioned Mitchell visited Maryland. I think with West, he also visited Duke officially, and may have taken an unofficial visit to Georgia Tech. So it sounds like kind of a 3-team ACC battle for West. He's from High Point Andrews, and Mitchell from Gastonia Asbrook High School. Hadn't been a whole lot of in-state kids. There's only 3 right now, if I'm right, committed in this class, which we knew it was kind of a down year for in-state prospects, but still a little bit surprised to see. If I'm right, is that 3, right? We got Isaiah Jones, Williams, the linebacker, and Brody Barnhart. Yeah.
Yep.
Safety from Charlotte. So, if they were to get all 4 Plies, Martin, Mitchell, and West, you basically, because you also brought in Marcus Maskell, however you pronounce his last name, I apologize, from Georgia, the state of Georgia. He verbally committed to, was it Florida?
Florida.
Right after the visit. That was the LSU Florida NC State battle. So just to get him in for an official visit the weekend before he's announcing, pretty big deal. That's a pretty nice accomplishment. But if you're able to get the other 4 guys you hosted on official visits, then you pretty much hit a home run. For your offensive line board, you pretty much hit a home run. And then it's a matter of how was your evaluation and how they're going. That's a hard position to evaluate. It is a very hard position to evaluate. But I will say this: if they get Mitchell and West and Martin and Plies to go with the 4 players they got last year, that might be a 2-year stretch in terms of looking, how do they look coming off the bus type of offensive line recruits that you're going to see. Because the 4 guys they brought in last year, Rico Jackson, Kamen Smith, Darian Rivers, and Obisayu, they're about a good-looking freshman offensive lineman, physically speaking, as you're going to see. I mean, they are like prototype frames. And you add that 4 to this 4, you got 8 linemen in a 2-year class span that are really impressive coming off the bus. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I think it's something I've mentioned to you before. But obviously, they had 2 position coach changes. in last December. So they moved Kurt Roper over to quarterback. So he had to kind of reconfigure the 24 quarterback board. And then they brought in Garrett Tujay as offensive line coach and he had to kind of go through the offensive line board, make some changes. And, it's tough to really, you have to hit the ground running at that point to get those junior days set up in the spring and build some momentum. And obviously Coach Roper did an awesome job with that, getting Cedric Bailey Jr. to commit off of just that one visit to campus. And while things moved a little more slowly with the offensive line coach, things are going to pick up in a big way starting very soon. And yes, if that is their 4, then that is a huge success to go along with. I think we were both big fans of the offensive line class from last year.
Yeah. Let's move to the. We talked about how it wasn't a good in-state year, with the exception of receivers. It's kind of a weird anomaly. Class ended up being maybe a tad bit deeper than we thought it was at the outset, but that's understandable. You knew some guys were going to emerge during the evaluation period, and they did. And some guys got some offers in the camp season. But it's still probably not as deep as a typical in-state class in the state of North Carolina. But as you mentioned at the outset, the wide receiver position is probably as star-studded as it's been at the minimum in a long, 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 long time. It's not to say NC State's going to strike out. There's one particular receiver that Ethan has submitted a recruiting prediction for NC State. But the reality is as we get started here, and we have an announcement, I believe, coming Friday from Keenan Jackson. Is it Friday?
Tomorrow, Thursday
for Keenan Jackson. So that's going to kind of start the dominoes here for these in-state receiver prospects. What do you think has been so challenging for NC State? I'm going to list the guys here. Keenan Jackson from Weddington High School near Charlotte. You have Alex Taylor and Terrell Anderson, both at Grimsley High School in Greensboro. You had Jordan Chip at Providence Day in Charlotte. One of his teammates, Shannon Goodwin, had already gone off the board. He's going to be a Wolverine. He's also at Providence Day. Jonathan Paylor from Burlington Cummins. And then there's the kid at Crest. Who was the kid at Selby Crest?
Javarius Green.
Yeah. He kind of emerged later in the cycle, but he emerged. Why do you think it's been kind of a challenge? I think that's the question everybody at NC State World is asking. I mean, I wrote a commitment analysis, I believe, on Javon Bailey, and the first response on the message board is, how much money do we need in NIL to get a receiver? It had nothing to do with Javon Bailey, a corner. So why do you think it's been so challenging for NC State? And you really got to go back to last year's receivers class, was really good too. And they did get Kevin Concepcion, but they ended up being runners-up for Nathan Leacock and Noah Rogers. The year before that, they were kind of runner-up for Wesley Grimes, who looks like he's going to be a star at Wake Forest. Why do you think it's been such a challenge for NC State?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question that everyone would like to know. I mean, you have all these highly ranked kids, and the default you would want to go to is, it's hard to compete with a Michigan, with a Georgia or Ohio State, Tennessee. But if you look elsewhere, they're doing that, especially at the defensive back position. I think is a one you can really point to, as they're bringing in guys with that type of offer list. But so you have to kind of step back and be like, all right. And I was interested in that, and I asked that when I went to Charlotte and spent a lot of time out, and Greensboro, and spent a lot of time in those two areas, kind of asking coaches just kind of what's up with that. And the prevailing thought, everybody loves Coach Joker Phillips. Everyone you talk to is a huge fan of his. It is not that he is rubbing a high school coach the wrong way. It's not that he's rubbing the kids the wrong way. Everybody loves him. I honestly have no idea why a lot of these wide receiver recruits aren't ending up at NC State. I think if you look towards just comparing them to UNC, Maybe some of it is just the difference of offense track record. I mean, UNC's offense has been very explosive, and they are putting receivers in the NFL right now. That is something that NC State hasn't done in a little bit. I think if they had put a couple wide receivers in the NFL, then maybe they have a little more to pitch to these guys. Maybe it puts them over the edge. Some of it is bad luck. And I know that's not what NC State fans want to hear, but with some of it, wrong team offers at the wrong time leads to a complete shift in momentum. And that's kind of just what it comes down to. I don't know if there's that much NC State can do. And then there's the NIL component. I don't like harping on NIL too much when it comes to recruiting because, of course, everyone knows it plays a role. It's more often than not, I promise, not the deciding factor. So I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't think it's, NC State doesn't have the NIL money to offer these guys. I don't think that's it. But a lot of these kids have SEC offers. The allure of the SEC, that is real. And so when you see a kid leaving for the SEC, leaving for, a Michigan or Ohio State in the Big Ten, part of that is the prestige of those conferences and the winning history that those programs have right now. Yeah. If NC State puts together a huge season, gets past that 10-win mark and makes some noise there, maybe the wins can start to bring a few more of those recruits home. And I also think a thing that I've been told by multiple prospects is just that they want to see what the offense looks like on the field this fall. No one really knows how it's going to translate to Carter Finley Stadium, but there's a lot of excitement around it. And I think if Anai does what he did at every other school he's ever coached at and produces some 1,000-yard guys, then that will also help.
I agree with you too on the bad luck. I think sometimes if you were to take it individually and peel it back one by one, you start saying, yeah, I mean, like Noah Rogers, yeah, great receiver. NC State did absolutely everything right, but they got caught up in a Ohio State tsunami of recruiting wave that happened last year. And Rogers was target 1 or 1A or 1B on their board. And name a receiver Ohio State didn't get that they wanted last year. And so maybe in another year it would have been different with Noah Rogers. And then the case of Nathan Leacock, we talked about. He's a young man that kind of developed late. He was an NC State legacy. A lot of people just kind of put him off as, Wesley Grimes. There's Noah Rogers. By the way, that's the other guy that NC State offered, Nathan Leacock, when they were talking about local receivers. And I think there was a desire among Leacock's part to prove that he was an SEC caliber receiver. So when he got a Tennessee offer, he wanted to prove that he's SEC caliber. And not much NC State could do about that, right? And you're having some similar things. I mean, I think NC State right now, if they're not tied for the lead with Jonathan Paylor, they're behind South Carolina and probably in the second position. But Jonathan Paylor has been favoring South Carolina for how long?
Months.
So you start seeing if Wesley Grimes did not end up at Wake Forest, he probably ended up at NC State. So you've been bridesmaids to a lot of these really good receivers in the state of North Carolina. And I think when you start looking at them, you say, that kid ended up there for this reason, this kid ended up here for that reason, et cetera, and you realize maybe there's not something as systematic. There probably are some systematic components to this, but there also is what you mentioned, just bad luck, circumstantial components to it as well, where the timing just didn't match up well for NC State to take these receivers at this point in time. And that happens in recruiting. I'm convinced if Will Shipley was a year later in his recruitment, he would have been at NC State and not Clemson. But it just so happened he was going through the decision-making part right after NC State went 3-9 and the running back coach was let go, and Des Kissens. And so you had to kind of start that whole process over again, and he went to Clemson. Sometimes that just happens that way, and it's just bad luck. But The other thing we know, Ethan, is Wake Forest has proven that there are hundreds of good receivers out there that can be found. And so
That's a great point. Like I think there, if you even like you look in state this year, there's a few guys. Franklin Barrett Jr.'s one that I'd watch for an offer potentially this fall or late in the summer. But he's a guy who his recruitment's starting to pick up now, and he's got as good or better measurables than any of these other in-state receivers. Doesn't have the production they do, obviously, or the stars or the ranking, but shoot, there are a lot of good receivers in NC State's recruiting footprint.
Yeah.
And I think this year was a little unlucky because since it was such a good NC State receiver class, they went all in on a few guys. Maybe the board could have been a little larger and you had a few more plan B, plan C guys. But shoot, I think even a plan C receiver still has a good shot to be good. And it's I'd say, I'll see if you agree, I think it's probably the deepest high school position group in the country.
Yeah, almost yearly too, because it seems like used to be your best athlete would be your running back or your quarterback, but now teams are making it your receiver.
Mm-hmm.
In high school level, your best athlete, because the field is just spread out even at the high school level. So you can find guys. Takes a little bit more effort versus the no-brainers of the Noah Rogers and the Jonathan Paylors and the Alex Taylors of the world. But they're out there, and they can be found. And quite frankly, sometimes NC State has got caught overlooking. I remember Jaquari Roberson was at Wake Forest, was at a Hertford County High in the northeastern part of the state. NC State kind of threw out a very early offer to him, and then as time went on, other guys sort of moved up on the board. He kind of slipped it at it, off the radar a little bit. He ends up going to Wake Forest, and I think he's in the NFL now. So they're out there, and they can be found, and we'll just see how it plays out. There's also a thing called the transfer portal and junior colleges as well, if you need to go find somebody immediately. So, Ethan, my last question as we wrap this podcast up. I'm going to say July 15th. NC State currently has 10 verbal commitments. How many will NC State have on July the 15th?
Let me do some mental math here. I'm going to say...
See you. I'm watching you through the screen. I can see, okay, left wide receiver, offensive line, linebacker, defensive line.
I'm going to say 15.
15?
And I think 4 of those I feel pretty confident in. And there are 2 prospects I could see going either way. And those prospects are Elijah Groves, who announces this Saturday. That's he has a top 3 out of Kentucky, NC State, and Purdue. His last visit was to NC State. We'll see what happens there. And then Justin Terrell, who's now NC State is tied at the top of his recruitment with a mystery school he didn't want to share, but he's deciding. I believe it's the 12th. So I could see NC State securing a commitment from either of those guys. I could see them going elsewhere as well. So those 2. So we'll say anywhere between 14 and 16 commits by July 15th.
15 was my number. I think we'll probably have the same 5. Once we talk off air, we'll probably have the same 5 in mind about that. So I would say wild card being, let's say a lot of these receivers go off the board, which could very well be a possibility here over the next 2 weeks, and they decide to go ahead and offer a Franklin Barrett at Wake Forest High School. That's a wild card in the equation. So for those who didn't know, by the way, Groves is a linebacker from where in Tennessee? Is he from? Nashville? Is he a Nashville kid?
Outside of Nashville.
Okay. Nashville area?
Yeah.
Okay. Very impressive film. I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very fluid linebacker.
He's my favorite linebacker on the board. I think the staff is a big fan of his too, from what I've gathered from sources. So that's he's 6'5", plays safety for his high school, and he would be really, really good addition.
After this, dead period has started, so all the official visit weekends are up. Alpha Wolf Showcase will be at the end of July. I don't know if we have the exact date on that yet, but that'll be
I
at
think
the
it's the 28th.
yeah. So that'll be the next big event we'll cover. Then after that, football practice time, and we'll start gearing up to UConn in April 31st. So, well, it'll be here before you know it. As we recorded this podcast, it is 64 days to the start of NC State football season, and I think there's some games that first weekend before that. I don't think it's a very good week 0 schedule this year.
No, but week 1 is electric this year.
Yeah. And the good news is
Really
NC State's playing Thursday, so you can spend all day Saturday watching week 1 action. So it'll be awesome. So, quick reminder, please, as I noted at the beginning of this program, check us out on YouTube. Follow us on YouTube. Rate and review this if you're listening on the podcast. Leave a comment if you want. Any kind of comment. Can't guarantee you will answer it, but leave a comment. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. All the handles are the same. The Wolfpacker. And if you want to follow Ethan on Twitter, Ethan M. McDowell, right? Is that right? It's been a while since I've done this. I'm trying to refresh my memory on a lot of this. And as a reminder, please go check out our friends at rogueshop.com for all of your natural cannabis needs. If it's anxiety, if it's sleep deprivation, if it's chronic pain, any of those type of things, check them out. They may have something that could really help you out if you've been struggling to find your answers. They are safe, they're legal, they're natural. It's a small company. It's a husband and wife outfit. Check them out. They will be glad to help you out and point you in the right direction. So, for Ethan McDowell, this is Matt Carter. This has been the Wolfpacker Show.